Welcome to Milk Drunk by Bobby, a straight-up conversation about parenthood without the BS. We'll be featuring parenting experts, people you may recognize, and some others you might be meeting for the first time. Milk Drunk is brought to you by Bobby, the mom-founded and led organic formula brand shaking the stigma around how we choose to feed our babies. Our goal is to have open and honest conversations that make parents feel less alone. Think group chat energy, but I'm not going to text you recipes you're never going to make. I'm your host, Angelica Temple, and today's episode is all about the first year of parenthood, how we survive and thrive as parents, and how our babies do as well. We have two incredible guests, clinical psychologist, New York Times bestselling author, public speaker, content creator, and teacher, Dr. Shefali. But first, we're going to kick things off with father, entertainer, host, and fashion designer, Tan France. Oh my gosh, Tan, I am so excited to meet you and to have you on the Milk Drunk pod. So thank you for joining us. For listeners,
oh my gosh,
for listeners who are so in the throes of parenthood that they somehow do not know who you are, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. It's always a weird thing introducing yourself. My name is Tan France. I am a father, first and foremost. I am an entertainer. If you watch Netflix, I am on a global show called Queer Eye, which is my first baby. And then I'm also the host of Next in Fashion. And I'm a fashion designer. That's it. That's simply it.
Just a few things. No big deal.
Yes.
Today, we are going to talk about surviving and thriving in the first year of parenthood because you have done it, Tan. You were past the first year.
I sure have done it. I think every parent that passes that first year deserves that moment there where someone says, you did it. The first 6 months are kind of a blur. And I often say that as a perfunctory response when somebody says, how was it? I'm like, the first 6 months were a blur. Not so much of a blur because I do remember how brutal it was. I struggled so much those first 6 months. I cried so often. And so I just want to lay the foundations and explain because before I became an entertainer, I've only been in entertainment for about 5 years. Before then, if I had listened to a famous person give an interview, I'd be like, whatever. You didn't even raise your own kids. You've got nannies and this and that. I'm like, you don't know the normal experience. However, I will say for the first 5.5 months, we didn't have any nanny, no night nurse, no help. It was my husband and I. We didn't have anyone come over because we had a COVID baby. And so it was just my husband and I. There wasn't the village that my family talked about. When you have your baby, because we're very Asian, we're not a white family. Although we were raised in the West, we still, back home in England, live like we are still in Asia. So yes, you have the luxury of having that village that will help support you. Every one of my siblings went to my mom's house for the first couple of months to have her help. All of us siblings got involved. Gosh, the amount of nights I spent helping my siblings by taking their babies overnight. We all did that for each other. We didn't have any of that here. And this isn't me with my tiny violin. This is just for perspective to say, when you are truly on your own and it's just you and your partner, it is actually incredibly difficult. And the amount of times I've thought about single parents, I just think, how have they done it?
They're heroes.
They really are. Mind-blowing to me because even with my husband, we struggled. And we are both very active parents. This is obviously a given, and I can tell you are a perfectly woke person who understands that you don't need a wife to have two, or a mother to have two wonderful parents who can co-parent and raise a great child. But for those of you who don't know this, two men can raise a wonderful child and share equal responsibility. And I think that's the luxury of having a situation like ours, is that there isn't the expectation that the mom is just going to take care of this baby at night while you have to take care of him because you're probably feeding him, or you take care of him because you have the biological makeup that created that baby. There's none of that for us. We are equal partners in this. And even as equal partners, we struggled. And so I'm going to give you the minutiae
This
of
is
it.
amazing. I mean, that is that is such an interesting perspective that I didn't think about, in the sort of like not momness of it all.
Yeah.
And that you can really, I mean, listen, all sets of parents should be able to be equal parents, but you're so right that there are these defaults. There's this sort of like mental maternal load that's talked about so much. And I always talk about with my husband, I'm like, I have the most equal partner possible, but I'm still de facto parent.
Angie, I've seen it so many times with, I don't have friends who aren't, I hate this word, but I can't think of another word, woke, aware of how ridiculous it is to assume that the mother is responsible solely for the child. Yet even my most open-minded straight men friends, when we're at a restaurant, we're at the house, and the child is being incredibly fussy and really unhappy, the default is always, gosh, I can't calm the baby. Here, mother, you will. This is your responsibility to calm that child. We don't have that. Both of us are in the exact same position. And so it makes for an interesting experience when raising your baby. However, those first few months, I was working still. I was still shooting shows. Wow. I was still doing my 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. And I was running on empty. I was running on fumes. It wasn't just empty. And so my husband and I decided to split time at night, where between 10 and 3 was my shift, between 3 and 8 was his shift. And there were so many nights, especially at the very start, that I just thought, I think I might actually die of exhaustion. And I know that sounds so dramatic, but any parent who's gone through that at night, you have just the darkest thoughts. You really do. And this never happened, I swear to God. But people say the doctors warned us it is so easy to shake your baby. When you are angry, upset, and just going through it at night, if you feel that way, put your baby down in a safe place and walk away for 5 minutes. When the pediatrician first said this, when we were at the hospital, I was like, don't be ridiculous. I'm not stupid enough to shake my baby. But when you're in the middle of the night, you're in the darkest spot, you're like, I'll do anything to just stop this. I just need I need my baby to go to sleep. And so you get frustrated. And it takes so much willpower to be like, I'm going to put my baby down. I'm going to walk away for 10 minutes. And that's real talk, real talk. I don't want to get on a podcast like this and say, no, I never had a dark thought. I never got upset. Every parent that's a real parent understands how hard those first few months are. Our baby was born 7.5 weeks early. He was in the NICU for 3.5 weeks. And at the time, I was desperate to get my child out of the NICU. Of course, any parent would be. And I just wanted to get him home. Even though the NICU was absolutely the best place for him, I don't think I appreciated just how lucky we were to have almost a trial period of being a parent before we took him home.
Yeah.
And it was full throttle. Like in the daytime, we were at the hospital. At nighttime, we got to go back to the hotel and go to sleep. It was such a rude awakening when we first got back to our house and we had to watch our baby 24/7. I was like, wow, no one could prepare us for how difficult this was going to be. Initially, so we are in my bedroom right now. I always had these grand plans. I've wanted to be a parent since I was 17. And I always thought my baby's going to sleep next to me. I'm going to have my bassinet next to me. And for the first 2 nights I did. And then I was like to my husband, Rob, we can't do this anymore. I love my baby. We love our baby. But that doesn't mean he has to sleep right next to us because they make all kinds of noises that I forgot.
They sound like little piggies or something. It's crazy. They're grunting.
Constant. It's constant. It's constant. There's not a 20-minute period that goes by where a weird noise isn't made. And because you're so hyper aware as a new parent, you just want them to make it through the night. That every little sound, you're like, what was that? Are they okay?
Oh yeah.
And so those first 2 nights we didn't sleep.
No, you're like sleeping or laying down in like a state of tension. Like you're ready. What is that? What is that? What is that?
Yeah. I've said this time and time again, we were very practical. I'm a very practical parent, and thankfully my husband is too. He doesn't get dressed up in fancy outfits. So my job in entertainment is to style. I'm
Of
very much into
course.
fashion. And people assume that I'm putting my kid in Gucci. I ain't. He's got a onesie on almost all the time. And I know that people call them pajamas. It's a baby, they're not his pajamas. Yes, I change him out of the
Yeah.
outfit that he wears to bed.
Daytime
When he
onesie,
goes into
nighttime onesie.
That's exactly it. I'm changing his nappy like four times every between each nap. I don't sorry, nappy is a diaper. I see so many influencers, or probably better parents than me, quite frankly, who from day one put their kids in outfits, and I just think that's lovely for you, but I'm feeling terrible that you're doing the most,
Yes.
and I'm just trying to coast along to make sure that everything else is going right in my life. Almost every onesie I put my child in was black. I wanted it to just be really chic, and it's not very often I saw babies in black onesies, and I just thought that's my
Oh, I like
version
that.
of style for my baby. It doesn't have to be an elaborate outfit. It's just a black onesie.
Yep.
And so we did that for a long time. And now we just play with color. I just like for him to look. I want to see him and laugh. Like I want to see him and think, that crazy little
Yeah.
bean, like he's in
Oh,
a silly outfit that's got this tail on it, like he's a lion. Like
yeah.
I want it to be playful. I want him to be a baby. I don't want to put him in an outfit that I would wear. He's my child. I want him to be a child.
Yeah, totally. All right, Tan, shifting gears, let's talk a little bit about advice.
Yeah.
What was the most helpful parenting advice you received at the onset?
Getting my baby on a schedule was the best advice I got and the best advice I can give. Whether you're a working parent or you're a stay-at-home parent, I think it just makes your life a little bit easier, and they regulate their emotions a little bit better, in my opinion, if they're on a schedule. And then something called a dream feed was the
Yes.
best thing anyone ever has mentioned to me. Let me explain for those of you who don't know. If you've got a child who, let's say, for example, is going down at 7:00, and you're finding that they wake up around about 1 or 2 o'clock, which is what our baby was doing. And that means you have to wake up at 1 or 2 o'clock, and then they can usually get to bed and go back to bed until 5 or 6 a.m. To try and eliminate that middle of the night feed, if you feed them at like 10:30, that should then hopefully push them closer and closer and closer over time to the 5, 6, 6:30 time of the morning. He would skip then that 1 o'clock, and it would get closer to 2, then it would get closer to 3. So all in all, that took like 2 weeks. And then we were out of that period where he needed a nighttime feed. That first year with schedule, with getting better with sticking to a schedule, and with Bobby, those things combined, I think saved us and got us to a place that we're at now. We fed our son Bobby from the day he could, which was not from the start, because Bobby you couldn't use for a preemie baby, and our baby was so extremely preemie. And so by the time he hit his actual due date, we started him on Bobby, and his poos got better, which any parent who is a new parent, you know that poo, knowing that they've pooed, is like winning an award.
Yes.
Or whatever your version of the best thing that's happened to you is.
Absolutely.
It didn't cause him sensitivity on his stomach, and it was the kind of food that could actually keep him happy and for long periods of time. And so those are the things combined, feeding him the way we needed to feed him with Bobby, and setting a schedule. That year, I think, was a lot easier for us than it is for a lot of parents. And now looking back, thinking we did it, we accomplished that year. It's mind blowing. I can't believe we got through it. It felt at the time that was never going to end, quite frankly. But when I look back on that year, I just think it was a year of such duality when it comes to the hardest times of our lives and the most joyful times of our lives.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing I want to talk about in this first year is the relationship aspect of it and your sense of self. What did you do to take care of yourself and your relationship with Rob during that first year?
That is such a good question. And of all the questions I've ever had about having my baby, no one's ever asked. Yeah, I'm the one who always says it is so important to maintain that.
Yeah.
And I've got a few friends right now who are married, and I see their relationships tested so badly. And Rob and I, made it very clear that we will love this baby, and he has become the greatest love of both of our lives, respectively. Even though I love my husband more than life itself, this baby came in and overtook everything in my
Mhm.
life. I'd never felt love like it before. But that doesn't mean that just because we've got this focus, this baby that is so demanding means that we drop the ball on each other. And so we still take time every evening when our baby goes down to have dinner together. We cook together, we eat together, we put our phones away, and we just catch up on the day. We don't talk about baby, no baby talk.
Oh, that's so
It's
good.
who are we as people outside of being parents. I know this is such a luxury, but it's just the position I'm in. We have a nanny now,
Hmm.
and at least once a week we will go out for a meal together. No baby talk. I mean, obviously there's a bit of baby
Sure.
talk because he is the most important thing in our lives, but it's not okay. We need to make sure this happens. We need to buy this for him. We need to none of
Yeah.
that. It's not logistical baby talk. It's
Mm.
just, do you see what my baby did today? Like, I love that boy. And then we talk about whatever else is going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And that's really important to us. And so really remembering that the only way we can do this is together.
Mhm.
And the way we do this together is by showing each other love and respect always. We have slightly different parenting styles. An Asian way of raising a baby is different from a Wyoming former Mormon white way of raising a baby.
Yes.
But we found common ground, we find compromise, and we can only find that because our relationship is solid and we've committed to making sure that our relationship is just as important as the one we have with our baby.
I think people underestimate the value of your child seeing you as a whole person. And I think it
Yeah,
translates
yeah,
to so much of just like how you live your life by sort of
yeah,
letting them into it, and
absolutely. I also really like to show affection to my husband in front of my
Mhm.
child. My husband and I are so affectionate, always have been, and I don't want that to stop just because there's a baby there.
Mhm.
And so, if ordinarily I am very touchy feely with my husband, even though we've been married for 15 years.
Mhm.
When he enters a room or he's just come home from work or I've just come in from work, I will embrace him. I will hold him for ages. I will kiss him, and I want my child to see that love between us. And we've got grand plans for how we're going to explain me being away at work so
Yeah.
often. I want my son to come to work and for him to see this is all for him, that this is what hard work looks like. Yes, it would be lovely if we could be together all the time, but that's not the world we live in. We have to go to work. And so for all of those things, I want my child to be really well-rounded and see the example that we're setting for him. If we have a disagreement, which thankfully isn't often, but if we have a disagreement we don't usually argue about our own life stuff. After all these years, I think we've basically morphed into the same person. But if we've got disagreements on what we want to feed him or what we want to do to play, and we don't, and it could turn potentially into an argument,
Mhm.
we would never do that in front of Ismail. I never want him to see us argue. I want for us to be able to talk about how we resolve this issue, but he will never. I never want him to see us arguing, or for him to think that's how you solve that debate. You
Totally.
fight, you get angry, you throw things. None of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, just speaking about the work piece of it, what was it like getting back into the grind, and what advice would you give new parents who are heading back to work, and especially those who maybe are not surrounded by a bunch of other new parents?
I was surrounded by no new parents. I am one of the luckiest people in the world, but I went back to work 2 days after my baby was
Oh
born
my gosh.
because I was in contract and I just had to. But I was doing short days then. I was doing 7 to 8 hour days instead of 12. And so I would see my baby on lunch breaks, and I would go and go to the hospital and see him every evening. That is a certain kind of torture that I can't even say, this is how you solve these emotions.
Mhm.
That there wasn't a way I solved those emotions. I cried all the time in the restroom or on my way to work or in my trailer. It's heartbreaking. Leaving your baby, especially in a hospital, is heartbreaking. I wish I could give advice on how you process those
Yeah.
feelings. All I can say is the only advice I can give is that it gets easier over time. All I will say is find other parents. That has been
Yes.
so valuable to me. And that really helped me feel less alone. It helped me feel less blue about it. It helped me process my feelings to know that other people were feeling things that I was feeling. So if you can get community, that might be your best way of navigating those choppy waters.
So speaking of the 1 year mark, let's talk about moving on from bottles and formula to cow's milk and food. What was that
Yeah.
transition like for you? Like, did it go
Um,
easily? You know, any?
no.
No.
Uh, so I don't think this is how this is meant to go. I don't know if you're not meant to give your baby Bobby or formula after a year, or if it's just not advised. But from 1 year until like 14 months, we were
Mhm.
still kind of giving him Bobby, but no
Yeah.
longer with water. So we gave him
Okay.
cow's milk with a tiny bit of Bobby. Sorry, with half the amount of Bobby. And then we reduced that, and then till the end, it was like half a teaspoon of Bobby, so
A
you could
sprinkle.
just tell it was there. Yeah, so you could just tell it was there. And then finally, at close to 14 months, he was off. But yeah,
Okay.
it took like 2 months. Took like 2 months. And
Yeah.
then once we got on cow's milk, he's never been into it. No matter what milk we've tried,
Oh,
not into it.
interesting.
So he
Okay.
still drinks milk, but he'll have like 2 ounces, and then he wants food. My son
Yeah.
is all about food. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so I was sad that we had to give up formula. I wish we could still do formula because he
Yeah.
doesn't want milk. He wants
Yeah.
eggs. He wants toast. He wants
Yeah. That's
avocado. Like, he
great.
wants to be a man. Yeah.
Yes. So before we wrap up, I want to hear about your son's first birthday. What was it like for you, that milestone? Did you have a birthday party? What can you tell me?
Okay. Controversial. And this is no
Oh.
shade to any of the parents. Do whatever feels right for you. Celebrate your child however you want. We did not throw
Okay.
our child a first birthday party. There was no cake. I personally, again, this is going to sound like I'm judging everybody else. I'm not. This is just what's right for my family, my child. I don't
Yeah.
love a smash cake. My son doesn't have sugar, and I don't want him to have a full smash cake for the first time he's eating sugar. Like, he has fruit, but he doesn't know what dessert is yet. He doesn't know what soda
Yeah.
is yet. And I would like to wait for as long as I possibly can to give him those things. So he didn't have that. Because he was one, we didn't do a party because he's never going to know. And so it was just me, my husband, and my nanny who just had a meal together with him that was an extra special meal that I cooked. But that was the extent of the party. We didn't buy any gifts because he's never going to know. And he has
Yep.
everything a child could ever want. He's a very lucky baby. We try not to spoil him, but he's got toys. He's got plenty of toys. He's got plenty of
Yeah.
clothes. He doesn't want for anything. He's got food on the table. And so I'm hoping that we're going to continue that for another couple of years until he understands
Yeah.
what birthdays are. We did the same for Christmas. We love Christmas in my house. Like, me and my husband have our tree up so early. We have done for a long time. But there were no presents under there. Me and my husband don't swap presents. We haven't done in at least 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want him to think that he gets the world always.
Yeah.
And because he's so young, he's never going to know.
Yeah.
All my friends all my friends who aren't entertainers are like, how could you not do a big birthday? How could you not get gifts? How could you not give him cake? I just think, is he ever going to know?
Yeah.
No, I will tell him that and even if he looks back in 20 years and like, you didn't give me anything for my first birthday, I would like to say, I treat you like I do your dad. I show you so much love all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anyone to tell me that this one day is when I treat you extra special. I want you to feel special every day. And that's how I am with my husband. My
Mm-hmm.
husband doesn't get birthday presents from me and vice versa. No Christmas presents. I show him I love him every day.
Mm-hmm. I love that. All right. One last question, which is,
Yeah.
what are you looking forward to most in this second year of parenting?
I'm really looking forward to building a solid relationship with my child,
Mm-hmm.
where he understands our relationship. That's my key for year 2, year 3, year 4, these next few formative
Mm-hmm.
years. I want him to understand that I will love him and play with him, but that I am the disciplinarian
Yep.
in the house. And so that's what I want from this next year, for me and my husband to really establish that we are going to do all we can for you and we are going to take care of you. But there are rules in this house. There are ways that we will behave in this house and in public. And this is how we would like to see life going forward. So that's what we're working on. We're also obviously working on making sure he understands language. And there's a few languages in our house.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I only speak Urdu and Hindi with him, which are Indian and Pakistani languages, respectively. My nanny only speaks sign with him because it makes it easier for him to be able to communicate. So right now, his main language is sign, and then his secondary language is Urdu. And that's wonderful. And then my husband speaks only English with him. So he's now 18 months, he doesn't speak to the level that my other friends' kids do at 18 months, but they only have one language in the house. And we're told by our pediatricians that he will take longer to speak because he's trying to figure out which language he should be responding in. But we are so good with that. I came from a multilingual household. We had a family that spoke 3 languages. I want my kid to understand language also. And so that language will be what we'll teach him this year, and then how to socialize him with other people. So with other kids. So we've started to introduce him to other babies within the group so he understands how to play.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
That's year 2.
I love it. I wish my parents had taught me Hindi or Marathi, but they didn't. It was just English in our house, and they would speak Hindi and Marathi to each other.
Yeah, that actually was the case a lot with my parents, but we picked it up because we were raised on Bollywood, and so we understood the language. And my language isn't perfect. It's not. It's very conversational. I couldn't talk about anything very comprehensive, but it's enough to be able to
give a foundation too. Because I feel like whenever I go back to India, I definitely understand more than I think I would. Well, thank you so much, Tan. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm excited to see this next year unfold for you as a parent. So exciting. All right. Thank you, Tan.
Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye.
It's slightly intimidating to hear someone tackle such a challenging year with so much self-assurance. So we want to take this conversation a little further. How do we get into that kind of mindset and headspace that allows us to be open to parenting and evolving? A place with boundaries, self-awareness, curiosity, and love. We're looking for healthy ways to begin our parenting journey. And who better to talk about mapping that relationship out than clinical psychologist and author of the Parenting Map, Dr. Shefali. Welcome, Dr. Shefali. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here to talk about how parents can use this new book I've written. It's called The Parenting Map, to do exactly what you just talked about. How can we set ourselves up, especially when our children are young, for the ultimate success? And let me tell you, I haven't yet met a single parent who doesn't struggle with their kid. There is no such thing as a perfect parent or a perfect kid. However, before I became a mom, because I was getting my degree in clinical psychology, I was a meditation practitioner, I certainly thought I had the audacity to think that I would be that perfect parent raising the perfect kid. And when I had a kid, I quickly realized that I was really dysfunctional, tragically so. And I was getting upset. I was reactive. I was losing my patience. And I just didn't know what was going on with me, because I so believed that I would be loving and eternally patient. And that's when, within the first year and a half or 2 of my daughter's life, that I really had a meltdown, a breakdown, and my greatest emotional and spiritual epiphany. And the epiphany I had was that what was really going on and what was in the driver's seat was not my parental heart, but my parental ego.
Were you focused on parenting in terms of psychology before being a parent?
Well, every psychologist worth their salt will,
of course,
extol the powers of early childhood, right? We all know that the first 7 to 10 years are really the foundation upon which all your lifelong patterns are based. It really sucks because, when parents have children, we are so young and dumb and we're not really aware. And that's when our children need us to be the most aware. So it's an interesting juxtaposition between our own parental audacity, superiority, and ignorance that comes into play when our children need us the most. But that's when we have the greatest invitation to also grow. Those first 2 years, especially, really can break us because we're not ready. We're not prepared for this. And that's what this conversation is about. How can we best prepare for this journey in the most conscious way possible?
Absolutely. I mean, and listening to you talk about, you knew early childhood was a focus, but then it's like you realized early parenthood also needs to be a focus. We're so focused on how we're supporting the child that we forget, what do we need to be able to support ourselves as someone that supports the child? Just to get into conscious parenting, can you define it for us? I know we're going to spend, the next chunk of this episode talking more about it, but what is conscious or gentle parenting as you define it?
In a nutshell, it is about the parent raising themselves into the highest state of consciousness. So the offshoot of that philosophy is that the child is not your focus, but your own state of awareness and evolution as a parent. And it sounds like, oh, okay, I knew that. But boy, putting it into practice is a game changer.
Why do you think conscious parenting is so popular right now? Why has this been such a major shift for millennial parents and parents of the moment?
Well, I think overall we're seeing a seismic shift toward awareness, toward mental health. People are becoming more concerned also at the state of our children's mental health, given the rise of social media, which has been a true destructive force as much as it's been a force for the good. So I think that there's more, of a vibe out there that we need to really pay attention to mental health issues. Once you realize that you are actually the cause of your own suffering because of your insistence or your obsession with creating a perfect child, once you realize that expectation is really what's causing all the dysfunction in your relationship with your child, then everything begins to pivot in a new way.
Wow. Okay. I'm like, this is becoming a session for me. So much of the first year is about survival. Where do you begin with conscious parenting? How do you incorporate it into that very early part of childhood and parenthood?
Yeah. The first stage is about understanding the mindset, the tools of a conscious parent. And I'll get into that in a moment. The second step is how do you not dump your dysfunctional baggage onto your children? And the third step is how do you connect? So all three have to work in tandem. Nothing is so linear and laid out. But the first step, and I talk to many parents who are expecting their first child especially, and I prepare them for this journey. And the main preparation begins in our mindset. So what does that mean? In a few sentences, what that means is you have to get your thinking right. You have to understand what is my role as a conscious parent. And here it is. The traditional parent's role is to control, fix, create, and micromanage their children so their children become near perfect. That's the ideal goal of the traditional parent. The goal of a conscious parent is to connect to themselves in their most authentic essence so that they make sure to connect to, uphold, and treat sacred the authentic essence of their children. And further details of that mindset include what are your expectations of yourself and your kid? And many parents will say, I expect to have control. I expect that my kid is kind of going to be someone I recognize, someone I can nurture, and someone I can curate. And I immediately lambast this expectation because if you begin with this expectation of raising this kind of perfect puppet, you are going to be on slippery slope ever from the first moment on. Yeah. So getting your expectations right. Do you understand, I tell parents, that you are not raising a mini me? Do you realize that you are now going to have to surrender all notions of your fantasies, of your control, because you are now going to join forces with a being who comes with their own destiny and will seek to manifest it exactly how they choose. While you can usher them, while you can guide them, of course you can. You cannot change who they are in their essence.
I'm so guilty of the fix it part of that. of that conundrum. I'm aware, I'm a helper, I'm a nurturer. And I think that's one of the thing, the pits I fall into, definitely as a parent.
But most women are empaths and caregivers and quote unquote fixers. I talk about the 5 ego types you can have as a parent, and fixer is one of them. And when we are of the fixer mentality, we don't realize that we are looking to create and fix a project as if the person is broken.
Oh, absolutely. And creating dependencies. Right. And
Exactly.
I'm a reformed fixer. I know who I am, and I am reforming. What are the benefits of conscious parenting at such an early stage? Are there language cues that we're using? What are sort of the strategies? You're starting with your own essence, right? To be able to recognize theirs.
Right. And it begins right away. So in practice, conscious parenting means being present.
Okay.
Not being sabotaged and overcome and overwhelmed by your childhood, and not living in the future that you're going to send your kid to an Ivy League college and start grooming them from the age of 2. Conscious parenting invites parents to see these early years of parenting as their invitation to enter the present moment. What that means is that we have to meet our children where they are here right now and connect to them. Children come built in with the machinery to be here right now. If you observe really young children, you will see that they have an innate capacity to be gurus of the present moment. So what we parents have to do if we want to be conscious is we have to stay there. Our tendency as traditional modern parents is to transplant our children from the present moment to the future, because we think that to raise a successful kid, you need to raise a successful adult right there in childhood. And we couldn't be more wrong, because childhood is its own unique state of being that invites the parent to come into and to enter. So what we parents do is we transplant the child from childhood to adulthood instead of letting the children take us from our adulthood into their childhood. So it means staying quiet, especially in the first year, not trying to overtalk, really to join into the rhythm of your child. Children are nonverbal. That is a blessing, so that we can learn how to also listen with our senses, connect with our senses, and not use words and doing, but enter the other senses and being. Infancy, that first year, is preparing parents to slow down, to keep it simple, to be in the here and now, and to be in our body. And these are the tools and strategies we will need as we move forward. Most of our reactions, once our kid hits 1, is when they start moving around, they start exploring their world. And now our control is getting challenged because our kid is not in the crib. Now, as a toddler, they're everywhere. So we begin to be threatened, and they don't understand the word no. They don't understand anything through the language, right? So they're very confronting to the parent's sense of control. What happens when they challenge our sense of control is that we get angry. We react. We start, losing our shit. What happens there without our realizing is that we dysregulate our toddlers. So it's very important for us to see what we're doing, because we're trying to control. Control what? Control that which cannot be controlled. And if we don't understand that on a deep level, we and our toddler will keep getting into conflict, and our toddler will learn unworthiness. Our toddler will learn to shut down. That's how early it begins, from our inability to manage our lack of control.
But one thing we talked about with Tan earlier on this episode, he made a point of speaking about how he and his husband never fight in front of his kid. And it's a rule that they have. And I'm curious your take on that type of thing, and how much you want to sort of show and let them know that conflict is okay, versus making sure they're in a really safe space where their foundation, can't be shaken up.
I would say that when kids are young, loud voices, intimidating energy is very suffocating. It's really overwhelming for their young nervous systems.
Mhm.
So I agree that we want to try to keep our loud voices and angry energy and domineering spirits out of our children's innocent presence. As they grow older, having an argument, having even a healthy conflict, if you can resolve it, if you can show that you can have different points of view, is really actually quite productive and healthy. But again, it cannot feel out of control for the kid.
Right.
Meaning
Not
we can't be out
fiery.
of control.
Yes.
It cannot feel scary. It cannot be violent. It cannot be abusive. So again, if we have worked on ourselves and if we're in a healthy relationship, then we can actually have healthy debates and arguments, which show that people don't have to be exact replicas of each other. And that's okay.
What's the best way to communicate this type of parenting style to grandparents, babysitters, nannies, other people that are coming into your life and caring for your kid?
I think, there are some areas that are black and white and a lot of areas that are gray. So the core black and white areas of conscious parenting have to do with keeping all sorts of shame, blame, guilt, anger, and, punishment out of the game. Like it's not okay. So I would say that black and white rule needs to be conveyed to your near and dear who are going to be taking care of your kids. I will then ask them to really show presence, but you can't force people to show presence and you can't push people to be conscious. So I have realistic expectations of grandparents. I don't expect them to suddenly become conscious human beings. So I, as a parent, would determine or discern how unconscious are these grandparents that I'm going to expose my kids to, because I need to be careful who comes into my children's near vicinity when they're young. We're talking about the first 5 or 6 years when our children are helpless. Our children cannot speak up for themselves. You as the parent are the curators, not of your children's well-being in terms of their essence, but their well-being in terms of their environment.
Dr. Shefali, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. I definitely learned a lot, and I wish that I had talked to you before I had children, but I'm still pretty early on, so I think I'm doing okay. Please tell our listeners where they can get your book and where they can find more of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me again. So this is the book. It's called The Parenting Map. You can find me at drshefali.com and on Instagram, Dr. Shefali spelled out. And I have tons of courses. I have a coaching institute where I train people to become conscious parenting coaches. And I'm always spreading the word because I truly see how conscious parenting changes families.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Wow, I needed that breakdown of conscious parenting. I could also probably use a few therapy sessions with Dr. Shefali. But in all seriousness, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Tan France and Dr. Shefali for your wisdom and your openness. Parents out there, I hope this was as helpful to you as it was to me. Be sure to follow Bobby on Instagram at Bobby for all Milk Drunk updates and sign up for the Milk Drunk newsletter at milk-drunk.com. Milk Drunk is powered by Bobby, hosted by me, Angelica Temple, and produced by Beth Rowe and the team at Full Picture Productions. If you're liking what we're shaking here at Milk Drunk, be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss a thing. If you have topics you want to hear discussed or have a hot parenting take, our DMs are always open.